All right, Reliance Industries. Let's get into it. Their Q3 results for fiscal year 2025 just came out. And, well, you've definitely given me quite the stack of stuff to go through here.
Yeah, we've got it all. The press release, the investor presentation, even the analyst Q&A, they're not holding anything back.
Which is great for us, right? Kind of feels like we're getting that,
Yeah.
behind the scenes look at this giant company. Though I imagine for someone just kind of casually glancing at this stuff would be pretty easy to get lost in it all.
Yeah, definitely a lot to unpack. Don't worry, though. We'll hit the main points, the big numbers, but we'll try and put it all together and pull out what's really interesting, what it all really means.
Okay, sounds good. So let's start big picture then. Reliance is, well, they're just growing. Revenue, EBITDA, profit, it's all up compared to last year, even compared to last quarter. Pretty impressive stuff. Anything really jump out at you about this strong performance?
Hmm. Well, it's really interesting to look at where the growth is coming from. Reliance, retail, and geo platforms, their consumer businesses, that's over 50% of their earnings now. This isn't, the old Reliance, not just the oil and gas giant anymore. They're becoming, well, a consumer powerhouse. It's a pretty big shift.
It is, yeah. It's amazing to think how much they've changed. Remember when they were basically known for those massive refineries, right? Now they're everywhere in our homes, our phones, even data centers now with all this AI stuff they're pushing.
And they're not shying away from it either.
Yeah.
Mukesh Ambani, the chairman. Yeah, he mentioned the Jamnagar refinery turning 25, which I thought was interesting, a nod to their roots.
Mm.
But it was clear he was way more excited about what's coming next,
Yeah,
especially on the digital and retail side.
makes sense. Seems like that's definitely where they're headed. Speaking of which, maybe we should dig into Geo a little bit. It's crazy how fast their 5G rollout is going. I mean, over 170 million subscribers already, and it's handling almost 40% of their wireless traffic.
It is. Yeah, and considering how recent the launch was, I mean, that's really remarkable.
It's not just phones either, right? Geo Air Fiber, their home broadband thing, that's getting some serious traction, especially, well, outside the big cities. Sounds like they're trying to reach 100 million homes with that. You think is that even realistic? It sounds like a huge undertaking.
Well, they're already the biggest air fiber provider, outside of China.
Yeah.
And it seems like they're really focused on these areas that haven't been served well in the past, which really plays into their whole digital inclusion strategy, right?
Yeah.
Getting everyone online, regardless of where they live. Ambitious, sure, but then again, they've kind of made a habit of pulling off these ambitious things.
That's true. And it's not just consumers either, right? They're winning over these big contracts, banks, the government, big companies. Like they want to be the go-to for connectivity, period. Not just, providing the infrastructure, but the whole package of services on top of it.
Exactly. And then, then there's the AI layer, right? On top of
Yeah.
everything.
That's where things start to get really interesting. They're talking, it's almost sci-fi stuff. National AI infrastructure, an AI cloud for everyone, even a GeoCloud PC that, well, essentially turns your TV into a computer. Is this all just, hype? Or is there something real there?
Well, they did show off some interesting use cases at the India Mobile Congress. Stuff with AI and education, agriculture, even, specific things like hospitality.
Hmm.
The GeoCloud PC thing, though, yeah, that one's pretty wild when you think about it. I mean, in a country where, not that many people own PCs.
Yeah, and it's all driven by that 5G network they've built.
Exactly.
Crazy to think what they might be able to do if they can pull it off. All right, so we've got this whole digital push, and then there's Reliance Retail, which just crossed, get this, $10 billion in quarterly revenue for the first time ever.
I mean, that's a mind-boggling number. Obviously, the festive season, played a role.
Yeah.
But it does feel like there's more to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, they've clearly been putting in a lot of work to streamline things, make everything more efficient. And it sounds like that's starting to pay off. Look at their grocery business. 37% growth in their, what do they call it, the B2C segment. That's huge.
Their own brands are doing really well, too. Campa, Independence, those are becoming household names.
So they're not just selling groceries, they're creating their own brands within that, right? Almost like a mini Unilever or something inside Reliance Retail.
Smart move, too, right?
Yeah.
More control over pricing, marketing, the whole thing. Builds loyalty, too.
For sure. And then their fashion and lifestyle business, that had a big comeback, too. All these new store formats, Yusta, Zorte, even a partnership with GAP. It feels like they're going after every segment of the market, from budget shoppers all the way up to the high end.
It's a multi-pronged approach, no doubt.
Mm.
And they're really adapting to what people want. It's impressive, really. And their omni-channel strategy, right?
All
They're
right.
online, in stores, through apps, they're everywhere.
Exactly. All right, so we've covered the consumer side. Now let's flip the script a bit. Talk about their traditional energy business, the O2C segment. Things aren't looking so rosy on the global market, are they? Demand is weakening, supplies up, all this geopolitical instability. It's putting a squeeze on margins.
No, it's definitely a challenging environment, but they're not just sitting back and letting it happen. They're doing things to, well, to try and mitigate those challenges, right?
Yeah.
Like they're getting cheaper feedstock, like ethane, gives them cost advantage.
Makes sense. And they're focusing more on the domestic market, which is, somewhat insulated from those global ups and downs. Plus, they're always looking for ways to be more efficient.
Right.
But are they making any, I guess you could say, strategic bets for the future? I mean, given how uncertain everything is globally?
Oh, yeah, definitely. They're expanding vinyl production, increasing ethane imports, even building out their specialty polyester capacity. What's interesting is, well, they're doing all this now when things are down. Costs are lower. It's a classic Reliance move, really, playing the long game.
Yeah, so they're not letting the current market stop them from getting ready for what comes next.
Smart. Okay, so we've got O2C. Now, their oil and gas business seems like it was a pretty steady quarter. But with gas prices expected to stay high globally, things could get, well, things could get pretty interesting there.
For sure. Production from their KGD6 field was a little bit lower, but then gas prices were higher, so it kind of balanced out. Plus, they're ramping up production from their coal bed methane wells, which, adds to the mix. And with all the disruptions globally and those low storage levels in Europe, yeah, gas prices are probably going to stay high for a while. Okay, so global picture, gas prices high. Now, what about India specifically? They import a lot of natural gas, right? So these high prices, that's got to be tough for them. But then, well, Reliance is a domestic producer, so wouldn't they actually benefit from this situation?
That's a good point. It's kind of a mixed bag for India overall. Definitely a challenge for the economy. But for Reliance, yeah, they're in a pretty good position to capitalize on it.
Seems like it, though we shouldn't forget they're also making these big moves to transition away from fossil fuels, right?
Yeah.
They're pushing to renewables, especially solar. That's another sign that they're thinking long term.
Absolutely. And speaking of long-term bets, their digital ambitions, especially with geo platforms, that's another one to watch. This 5G rollout, it's really just the beginning. I mean, remember how long we were all waiting for 5G? Now they're saying it's going to overtake 4G traffic soon.
And it's happening fast. They built this massive 5G network basically from scratch, covers almost the entire country. And they're using it for so much more than just, faster downloads on our phones. Think about Geo Air Fiber. They're bringing high-speed internet to places that honestly have been ignored for way too long.
That's a great point. It's not just about serving the big cities. They're really pushing to reach everyone. And 5G is it's the backbone of that strategy.
And it's not just consumers they're after, right? They're winning over these big contracts, banks, government agencies, even large corporations. Like, they want to be the one-stop shop for everything, connectivity, and not just the infrastructure, but all the services built on top of it.
Exactly. It's like they're building their own digital world. Think about Geothrex, their communication services platform, or even their push into the Internet of Things. It all needs a strong, high-speed network to work. And then there's the AI layer on top of it all.
Right, the AI. That's where it gets really fascinating. They're talking about using AI to improve their own operations, of course, but also to offer it as a product, something they can sell to others. Is that really realistic? Or are they getting a little ahead of themselves?
They're not just talking about it, though. They're actually showing what it can do. At the India Mobile Congress, they showed off GeoBrain, which is their AI platform, and Geo AI Cloud, which, it actually gives people a ton of free cloud storage.
Clever way to gather data, right? Build those AI models and then offer personalized services. But that GeoCloud PC thing, that one stuck with me. Turning your TV into a computer, using the cloud, could this actually be a game changer? For education, remote work, even just entertainment.
It could, yeah. Especially in India where, a lot of people don't own PCs. Imagine if they can make reliable, affordable cloud computing available to millions of households.
It's a big if, right? But the potential's huge. I guess we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. All right, let's bring it back down to earth for a second. Talk about Reliance Retail again. I still can't get over that $10 billion revenue figure. What's the secret to their success?
It's a few things, really. First, just the sheer scale of what they're doing. Their network of stores, both online and, brick and mortar, is just massive. They've got every category covered. And second, they're incredibly efficient. They're always optimizing their supply chain, streamlining everything, finding ways to cut costs.
And let's not forget their private label brands, right?
Huh.
Campa, Independence, all those. That gives them a lot more control and helps them compete with the big players.
Yeah, it's like they've built their own little conglomerate within Reliance Retail,
Hmm.
and they're not afraid to try new things. Look at their new store formats, Yusta, Azorte. Those are clearly aimed at, well, at younger, more fashion-conscious shoppers.
They're adapting, no doubt about it. And their, what was it, omni-channel strategy? That means they're meeting customers wherever they are. In the store, online, through apps, however people want to shop.
Exactly. And online grocery, that's another big one. They're using their existing stores for fast deliveries. And they're also building out subscription models, marketplaces, the whole thing. It's a pretty comprehensive approach.
Definitely not putting all their eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
All right, so we've covered the consumer side, the digital side. Now let's go back to their more traditional energy business, the O2C segment. We talked about how the global market's not looking so good right now, right? Demand's down, competition's up. How are they handling all that?
Well, they're doing a few things. One, they're really focused on efficiency, sourcing cheaper feedstock, optimizing their product mix, really squeezing out every bit of profit they can.
Makes sense. And they're making strategic investments, right? Expanding vinyl production, increasing those ethane imports, building out their specialty polyester capacity. It's like they're playing offense and defense at the same time.
Exactly. They're not just reacting to the current situation. They're trying to anticipate what's coming next. And they're doing it all now while costs are low. It's a classic Reliance move, really. They're always thinking long term.
Smart. So are there any, I don't know, any potential downsides to this strategy? What if the market doesn't recover as quickly as they're expecting?
Yeah, there's always that risk. These are big investments, a lot of capital involved. But, Reliance has a history of, well, of making bold moves that end up paying off in the long run. They're not afraid to take chances.
True. All right, let's move on to their oil and gas business. With gas prices staying high globally, it sounds like they're in a pretty good spot, right?
Yeah, as a domestic producer, they're kind of insulated from those global price swings. And they could actually make even more money with those higher prices. They've got those big reserves in the KGD6 basin, and they're ramping up production from their coal bed methane wells, too.
They also mentioned that the government in India just raised the ceiling price for gas, right? Which is good news for them, obviously. But what about the environmental side of all this? Are they doing enough to shift to cleaner energy sources?
That's a big question. And while they are investing in renewables, their main business is still, it's still very much based on fossil fuels. So, yeah, they're going to have to find a way to balance those growth ambitions with, well, with their responsibility to the environment.
It's a tough balancing act, one that a lot of energy companies are facing right now. But it's one that Reliance can't ignore. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about their consumer businesses, the digital push, the energy side. It's a pretty complex picture, right?
It is. But I think what we're seeing is a company that's, it's in transition, moving from being just an energy giant to something much bigger. They're embracing all this new tech, expanding their retail presence, and they're not afraid to make big bets on the future.
And they're not afraid to shake things up either. Disrupt existing markets, create new ones. It's pretty impressive, really. And they seem to be doing it all with a long-term view, balancing those short-term gains with investments in the future.
It's a fascinating case study, no doubt. How to adapt, how to innovate, how to thrive in a world that's changing so fast.
Yeah.
But their journey's not over. There are challenges ahead, risks, tough decisions to make.
And that's what makes it so interesting to watch, right? So as we head into the final part of our deep dive, what are the big questions that are still kind of lingering in your mind?
Well, one thing I keep coming back to is, well, the ethical side of their AI push. It's one thing to use AI to, make things more efficient or recommend products. But what about things like algorithmic bias or the impact on jobs? Privacy. These aren't just theoretical concerns anymore. As Reliance gets more involved in AI, especially with those ambitions to build national AI infrastructure, the stakes get higher. It's not just about the tech. It's about using it responsibly. How do you make sure these AI systems are fair, transparent? How do you make sure people aren't left behind? These are big questions that Reliance will have to answer. And the answers will matter, not just for them, but for everyone.
It feels like we're entering a new era, where the decisions made by companies like Reliance will shape, well, not just the tech landscape, but the social and ethical fabric of our lives. And speaking of shaping the future, their oil and gas business is at a crossroads too, right? They're in a good position now with gas prices high, but how long will that last? And are they really doing enough to move towards a more sustainable energy future?
It's a balancing act, for sure. They're boosting production from their existing fields, ramping up that coal bed methane output, which makes sense given the current market.
Hmm.
But they're also putting a lot of money into renewables, especially solar. The question is, can they make that transition fast enough to stay ahead of the curve as the world, as the world moves towards cleaner energy?
And their investments in things like carbon capture and storage, are those a real effort to reduce their impact? Or is it just a way to keep the fossil fuel business going a little longer?
Yeah, that's a debate that's happening everywhere, not just with Reliance. Some people see carbon capture as, well, as a necessary bridge to a low-carbon world. Others say it's just a distraction, that we need to get off fossil fuels completely and fast. It's hard to say who's right.
I guess we'll have to see how it all plays out. Reliance seems to be, well, they're hedging their bets a bit, investing in both traditional energy and renewables, which makes sense, I guess. But it does make you wonder about their commitment to sustainability in the long term.
And remember, they did make those pledges to be carbon neutral by a certain date. Can they really do that while still growing their fossil fuel operations? That remains to be seen. It's something they're going to have to be transparent about if they want people to trust them.
Yeah, for sure. So, on the one hand, we've got this story of incredible ambition and innovation, but then there are these big questions about ethics, sustainability, the impact of their decisions. It's almost like a microcosm of, of the challenges facing India and maybe the whole world as we deal with all this new technology and what it means for us.
It's a good reminder that, yeah, even a company as big and successful as Reliance, they're still figuring things out. Their choices matter, and they'll have consequences, both good and bad. It's up to us, as people who are paying attention, to ask the tough questions and hold them accountable.
I think that's a great point. This deep dive into Reliance, it's given us so much more than just financial data. It's given us a look into the future and a reminder that the choices these big companies make, they're going to shape that future in a big way. So keep asking those questions, keep learning, and yeah, keep holding them accountable. Until next time, stay curious.
Well, you're right. India imports a lot of their natural gas, so those high prices globally, yeah, that means higher energy costs for basically, well, for everyone in the country. Not great.
But for Reliance, they're producing gas right here in India, so wouldn't that actually be a good thing for them?
Exactly. It kind of shields them from those price swings.
Yeah.
And their own gas production, yeah, they could actually see bigger profits from that. So it's complicated for India as a whole, good for Reliance, maybe not so good for the economy overall.
Interesting. Seems like they're in a good spot, though, to take advantage of this situation. But they're also trying to move away from fossil fuels, right? All that investment in renewables, especially solar, that's a pretty clear sign they're thinking about the future.
Oh, for sure. And speaking of thinking about the future, their digital ambitions, those are pretty big too, especially with geo platforms. That 5G rollout we talked about, that's really just the tip of the iceberg. Remember how long we were all waiting for 5G to finally get here? Now they're saying it's going to be bigger than 4G and soon.
It's pretty mind-boggling how fast it's all happened. They built this huge, and it's important to note that it's a standalone 5G network. It covers most of the country, and they're using it for way more than just faster internet on our phones. Think about Geo Air Fiber.
Mhm.
They're bringing high-speed internet to places that honestly have never had good internet access before.
That's a really important point. It's not just about, serving those big cities. They're trying to connect everyone, and 5G, well, that's how they're going to do it.
And it's not just about consumers either, right? All those big contracts they're winning, banks, government agencies, even huge corporations, they want to be the one-stop shop for everything connectivity, not just the cables and towers, but all the services that run on top of that.
It's like you're building their own digital ecosystem. Think about GeoSlicks, their platform for all sorts of communication services,
Mhm.
or even their push into the Internet of Things. That needs a powerful network, right? And then you've got the AI layer on top of all of it.
Yeah, the AI, that's where it gets really interesting. They're talking about using it to make their own operations better, of course, but also to offer it as a product, something they can sell to other businesses.
Mm.
Is that even realistic at this point? Or are they getting a little ahead of themselves?
It's more than just talk, though. They're already showing what they can do. At the India Mobile Congress, remember, they showed off GeoBrain, their AI platform, and then there's Geo AI Cloud, which, well, it actually gives people a ton of free cloud storage,
Right.
which I thought was pretty clever.
Yeah, a good way to collect data, right? Train those AI models, and then they can start offering more personalized services. But the GeoCloud PC, that's the one that I keep thinking about. Using the cloud to turn your TV into into a full-blown computer. Could that really change things for education, remote work, even just, how we watch movies and stuff?
It could, yeah. Especially in India, where, well, not everyone has a computer at home. If they can make cloud computing reliable and affordable, yeah, that could open up a lot of possibilities for a lot of people.
For sure. Big if, though, right? We'll have to see if they can pull it off. Okay, let's come back down to earth for a minute. Reliance Retail. I'm still kind of amazed by that $10 billion revenue number. What's the secret to their success?
Well, a few things, really. First, it's just the sheer size of their operation. They have stores everywhere, both online and, brick and mortar, and they cover everything, pretty much every category you can think of. Second, they're incredibly efficient, always tweaking their supply chain, making everything run smoothly, finding ways to save money.
And they're really pushing their own brands too, right? Campa, Independence, all those. That gives them more control, more profit, and it helps them compete with all the big international brands.
Yeah, it's like they've created this mini empire within Reliance Retail.
Yeah.
And they're always trying new things. Look at their new store formats. Yusta, Azorte. Those are definitely aimed at, well, at a younger crowd, the ones who care about fashion and trends and all that.
They're definitely adapting. And their omni-channel strategy, that means they can reach people wherever they are, in the store, online, through their app, however people want to shop.
And online grocery, that's another big one. They're using their stores for those quick deliveries, and they're also building out subscription models, marketplaces, the whole 9 yards. It's a pretty impressive operation.
Yeah, they're not putting all their eggs in one basket, that's for sure. All right, so we've talked about the consumer side, the digital side. Now let's go back to their more traditional energy business for a minute, the O2C segment. We talked about how the global market's not looking so good these days, right? Demand's down, more competition. How are they handling that?
Well, they're doing a few things. One, they're laser focused on efficiency. They're finding cheaper sources of feedstock. They're optimizing their product mix, basically squeezing every bit of profit they can out of the current situation.
Makes sense. And they're still making those big strategic investments, right? Expanding vinyl production, importing more ethane, building out their specialty polyester capacity. It's like they're playing offense and defense at the same time.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. They're not just reacting to what's happening right now. They're thinking about the future. And they're doing it all now while prices are low, while it's cheaper to build things. Classic Reliance, really. Thinking long term.
Smart move. So are there any potential downsides to this approach? What if the market doesn't recover as quickly as they're hoping?
That's always a possibility. I mean, these are big, risky bets. But Reliance, they've always been willing to take those risks. And more often than not, they end up paying off.
True. Okay, let's move on to their oil and gas business. With global gas prices so high, it seems like they're in a pretty good spot, right?
Definitely. As a domestic producer, they're not as affected by those global price swings. And with prices high, well, they could make a lot of money. They've got those big reserves in the KGD6 basin, and they're increasing production from their coal bed methane wells, too.
And the government just raised the ceiling price for gas in India, right? Which is, well, that's obviously good news for them. But what about, the environmental impact of all this? Are they doing enough to shift to cleaner energy sources?
That's a big question. And while they're investing in renewables, their core business, is still very much based on fossil fuels. So they're going to have to figure out how to balance those growth ambitions with being responsible, with protecting the environment.
It's a tough balancing act, no doubt. One that a lot of companies are struggling with right now. Okay, we've talked about their consumer businesses, their digital plans, the energy side of things. It's a pretty complex picture, right? A lot of moving parts.
It is, yeah. But I think what we're seeing is a company that's, well, it's evolving, changing from an energy giant into something much bigger, something that touches almost every part of our lives. They're embracing new technologies, they're growing their retail presence, and they're not afraid to take risks to make big bets on the future.
They're not afraid to shake things up either. It's pretty impressive to see. And they seem to be doing it all with with a long-term perspective, not just chasing those short-term profits, but thinking about the big picture.
It's a great example of how to adapt, how to innovate, how to succeed in a world that's changing so fast. But their journey's not over. They've got challenges ahead, tough decisions to make. It'll be interesting to see what they do next.
So as we head into the final part of our deep dive, what are the big questions that are still on your mind?
One thing that keeps coming back to me is, well, the ethical side of all this AI stuff. It's one thing to use AI to, recommend products or make deliveries more efficient. But what about things like algorithmic bias, the impact on jobs, privacy? These aren't just hypothetical problems anymore.
It's kind of wild to think about how much AI is already part of, well, everything, right? And Reliance, it seems like they're really leaning into it, not just to, run their own business better, but as something they can sell to others. It's powerful stuff, though. Makes you wonder about, the ethical side of it all.
Yeah, definitely. And as Reliance gets more and more into AI, I mean, they're talking about building AI for the whole country. The stakes are only going to get higher. It's not just about the tech anymore. It's about using it responsibly.
Right. So it's one thing to use AI to, make things more efficient or whatever. But
Yeah.
what about things like algorithmic bias or how AI might affect people's jobs, privacy? Those aren't just theoretical problems anymore.
Exactly. And as these AI systems get more complex, well, these questions are going to get tougher. How do you make sure they're fair? How do you make sure they're transparent? How do you make sure people aren't left behind? Reliance, and I guess any company that's working on AI, they're going to have to figure that out. And the answer is, well, they're going to affect everyone, not just them.
It's a lot to think about. And
Yeah.
it's not just the AI, right? Their oil and gas business, they're kind of at a crossroads too, aren't they? They stand to benefit from those high gas prices, at least for now. But how long can that last? And are they doing enough to, to shift to cleaner energy sources?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, they are boosting production from their existing fields, ramping up that coal bed methane output, which, well, given the current market, it makes sense. But they're also putting a lot of resources into renewables, especially solar.
It's kind of like they're trying to do both, right? Fossil fuels and clean energy, which, I mean, I guess that makes sense in a way,
Yeah.
but it also makes you wonder about how committed they really are to sustainability.
Yeah, and they did make those pledges to be carbon neutral by a certain date, right?
That-
So can they really do that
Yeah.
while still growing their fossil fuel business? We'll have to see. But they're going to need to be, well, they're going to need to be pretty open about how they're going to do it if they want to
Yeah.
keep people's trust.
Transparency is key, that's for sure. So we've got this incredible story of ambition, innovation, but then there are these big questions too, right? About ethics, about sustainability, about the long-term impact of their decisions. It's kind of like a microcosm of all the challenges India's facing, and maybe even the whole world, as we try to figure out how to deal with all this new technology and what it means for us.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that even a company like Reliance, I mean, they're huge, they're successful, but they're still figuring things out. And their choices, well, those choices are going to have consequences, good and bad. It's up to us to pay attention, to ask tough questions, and to hold them accountable.
So at the end of the day, it's not just about, understanding Reliance. It's about understanding the forces that are shaping the world around us and recognizing that even the biggest companies, well, they're not invincible. Their decisions matter and they'll have an impact one way or another. It's up to us to make sure that impact is a positive one.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Keep asking those questions, stay informed, and yeah, keep holding those in power accountable. It's a wild ride ahead, but it's one we're all in together.
I think that's a great place to wrap things up. This deep dive into Reliance Industries, it's been fascinating. We've gone beyond the headlines, the numbers, and I think we've gotten a real sense of the complexities, the opportunities, the challenges. They're a company that's trying to do it all, and the choices they make, well, they're going to have ripple effects that we'll all feel. So stay curious, stay engaged, and until next time, thanks for listening.